Hey team, Goche here, and welcome to Unit 4, Day 4. The sun never sets on the British Isles. Despite my cheery demeanor, this is going to get real depressing real quick. After reading The Gift of Civilization, How Imperial Britain Saw Their Mission in India, learners will be able to cite evidence and determine the meaning of academic vocabulary through 4 text-based questions, scoring a 66% after revision RH 9-10.1.4. Okay, here's our learning intentions and I can statements for the day. I can cite textual evidence. I can determine the meaning of academic vocabulary. I can connect the shared exploitation of Indian, African, and First Nations people. Guiding questions. How did the exploitation of India propel the UK to a global superpower? And summarize the steps the British took to defeat their European rivals.
Let's settle this like my ancestors did. You want to exploit me economically?
Yeah, that's a brief clip from a direct-to-DVD terrible movie. You probably don't know what direct-to-DVD is, because you guys probably barely know what DVDs are. Ask your parents. Ask the folks. Ask the oldest people you know what direct-to-DVD meant. They'll tell you. It's pretty unimpressive. But today we're talking about the exploitation of India. India and Pakistan were both countries that were under the British thumb for a great deal of the 17th, 18th, 19th century. Here we go. So first thing let's get through here, because we got the protectorate. So we've talked about the vassal state. That, of course, was back in Unit 2. We've talked about the colony in this unit here. So now we have to talk about indirect rule. So the use of local rulers to administer laws and codes of MC encourages cooperation to prepare for future industry. Countries whose policies are guided by foreign countries not directly ruled, and most importantly, local rulers are left in place but accept advice regarding trade, industry, politics, and missionaries. So this is similar to a vassal state. Except in a vassal state, as long as the taxes are paid, everything keeps running. Versus in a protectorate, you submit to the overlord. So it's more of a puppet state, if you will. Sphere of influence. This is something we got to talk about. So the sphere of influence is an area in which outside powers claim exclusive investment in trading economic privileges. So sphere of influence largely breaks down to a place where an outside force is not directly in rule, but it kind of is. The best way I can describe this one is I went to school in York, Pennsylvania. And York, Pennsylvania is the home to Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And whereas Harley-Davidson motorcycles does not run York, Pennsylvania, they kind of do. Because whenever Harley makes any fuss about moving their factory to Mexico, the county bends over backwards, terrified to lose the A, rare manufacturing jobs still left in the 21st century, and B, Harley Week, which brings massive amounts of tourism dollars to the Yoko area. So that is kind of the sphere of influence, because those jobs extend out to other industries. Because of that job, there has to be schools to educate the factory workers' children. And there has to be grocery stores and pizza parlors and so on and so forth. So this is with countries as well. So the United States may not directly rule Mojo Land, but if Mojo Land is almost completely reliant on the United States of America buying its exports, in this case, being adorable and barking at the mailman, well, guess what? De facto, yeah, they are in charge. So, what is a charter? Well, a charter is a written grant by a country's legislative or sovereign body by which the body, such as a company, college, city, is founded and its rights and privileges are defined. Also known as a monopoly. A specific person or enterprise is the only supplier of a particular commodity. And this one that we're really focusing on is the British East India Company. Chartered in December 31st, 1600, it had a monopoly on the East Indian spice trade. They worked as a pseudo government in India because the crown says, hey, you guys, you have the exceptionally lucrative contract to exclusively trade spices. So beginning in 1707, it allowed for British East India Company to begin controlling India's political and economic life. It took them about 170 years to just set up complete control of the area. We'll get more into it. First, I want to drill down into what charters are. Kind of funny, charter cable. Cable is the best way that I can explain to you what a charter is. So you might not realize this, but have you ever noticed that everyone in your neighborhood has different cell phone companies, they have different insurance companies, but they all have the same cable company? Well, that's because of right-of-way passages. Those utility poles that are outside right now, look outside. Those were auctioned off. Your town, Newark, auctioned off to the highest bidder the right to use those poles. And they, the Optimum, have exclusive rights. That's why no one you know has Xfinity or Cox Cable or Spectrum. Nope. They have Optimum or they have Fios, which is kind of a backdoor deal because Fios is Verizon. Verizon's a phone company, and they just upgrade their phone lines to have fiber optic cables that can also send cable. It's a pretty sneaky backdoor way around the whole charter system. But that's why Optimum has 100% monopoly. I have Comcast where I live, and guess what? If I'm tired of Comcast, I can do nothing. I can put some bunny ears into my television because they're the only game in town. They have a complete monopoly. And my town chartered it that way. So, how did the East India Company do it? Well, simple. They would hire officers out of the British Army, and they would train Indian soldiers. Those Indian soldiers were called sepoys. Now, the running theme of this chapter is definitely going to be how little the British invest in learning about the area they're currently invading. Because in 1857, the Sepoy Revolution happens. A large number of British-trained Indians rebel against their British officers. Why? They're well paid. They're above everybody else socially. Well, the British didn't realize that those soldiers were primarily Muslim or Hindi. Why is that important? Well, because the British sealed their bullet cartridges with pork and beef fat. And if you know anything about people of the Islamic faith, which you should, because we did a whole chapter on it, they can't consume pork. And if you knew anything about the Hindi people, they're vegetarians. And the cow is sacred in their beliefs. So you might kind of question, quick diagram for you. Back then, unlike now where your bullets are completely encased and it's like hammer, gunpowder, bullet, they didn't figure that out yet. So they'd be in paper and it would be bullet, gunpowder, paper case. So in order to load your gun, you literally had to rip it off, pour it down the barrel, and ramrod it down. So naturally, if it is being sealed with beef or pork fat and you have to bite it, that's super offensive and super haram. So We're going to play a game of awesome, but really a bummer. So, let me get into British character. Tea, crumpets. Tea and crumpets, London. Yes. So the British built roads. We built bridges. That's terrible. I'm just going to stop. But the British, they built roads and bridges and railroads in India. They set up telegraph wires. Oh, almost got it. But in all actuality, it was a super big bummer because despite what the British think they were doing, what they were really doing was destroying Indians' cottage industries. So India at the time built everything was made at home. Their clothes were manufactured at home. So this flood of cheap British goods ended up destroying their local economy. Cheerio, love. The British, we built hospitals and introduced new medicine and provided famine relief. Yeah, but in all actuality, they destroyed the economy, so there's no good jobs for these individuals to take. So what you had was a population explosion without an increase in economic opportunities, which just meant you had more people who were going to work menial, terrible, labor-intensive jobs, which kind of what the British wanted. Because they were doing it all over the world at this point. We could see this map of Africa, and France was the undisputed ruler of exploiting Africa, but the British were a close second. And Cecil Rhodes in South Africa, he was, well, a monster. He found out that they had diamonds and gold, and he was exploiting it, using locals to dig it up and sell it. He was the de facto ruler of the southern part of Africa through his South African company. And on the other side of the world, we have Australia. Remember, we were just talking about ways that the British really deeply screwed the world up here. Because Australia is a continent. It is an island, but also just an actual continent. And the British, of course, being thrown out of America during the American Revolution, they lost their place to send prisoners. Because they used to, all right, committed crimes, we'd either hang you or we would send you to Georgia, which I guess says a lot about Georgia. And they were sent, so in 1788, they obviously can't send them to Georgia anymore because America's like, we don't want your criminals. So they decide we're going to send them all the way to the other side of the world. And apparently they held their criminals in much higher esteem than the people who actually lived in Australia because they promote a policy that was called White Australia. So basically they wanted to build Australia as this colony that would be good and British. So they prevented any non-Caucasians to immigrate to Australia, so much so that in 1901 they literally passed a law that said, if you cannot prove that you have European descent, you can't move to Australia. And you might ask, what about the people who were there already? Well, they're Aboriginals. And the European settlers did a good job of dividing them from their land, keeping them off the coast, because the interior of Australia is horrifying. Literally everything could kill you. So they would make sure that they either remove them, institutionalize them, reservations, or just kill them because they were seen as a nuisance. You know, the nuisance of people who live on the land that you want to take. I mean, I guess that's just the general theme of this whole chapter. But you're going to learn all about how the British used mental gymnastics to prove to themselves that they were fine. So, here's what you're going to do. You're going to open up this article right here. It's available on Google Classroom. And you're going to read the questions first, not second. You're not going to read the article, then read the questions. No, you're going to read the questions first. So you know what you're looking for. And when you find what you're looking for, you're going to highlight it in yellow. Anything that helps you answer one of the 4 questions, you highlight in yellow. Green, if you come across one of the words that we were talking about, Sepoy, British East India Company, any of the word, monopoly, charter, Any of the things that we talked about, highlight that in green. Author's point of view, bias. If you come across a word, greatest, best, heartless, bad, stupid, any subjective word, not empirical, highlight that word in blue. And finally, ask me a question. Do me a favor, don't ask me what a word is. You can Google that. Ask me what really is the pressing issues in your mind. Other than that, everybody, as always, be smart, be safe, have a good one. See you next time.